She kicked my gun shed door so hard it shook the whole yard, then pointed at me like I was some criminal. "This is a security threat, and I'm reporting you to the HOA right now," she screamed, even though she was standing on my land, not hers. I didn't say a word, because the moment her voice echoed across the property, my two guard llamas, Ranger and Smoke, lifted their heads at the same time. Their ears went back. They only do that when something's wrong. And Karen? She didn't even notice. She was too busy waving a fake clipboard like she owned half the county. "You have 24 hours to remove this shed," she snapped. "HOA rules." "There is no HOA here," I finally said. She laughed. "There is now." My stomach tightened, not because I was scared, but because I knew something she didn't. This land wasn't just mine. It was protected under a veterans' rural property program, and I had paperwork that could shut down any so-called HOA notice she tried to pull. But I stayed quiet. Let her dig her own hole. Karen stepped closer to the shed, trying to force the lock open. "I know you have weapons in here. You're a danger to the community." I felt the heat rise in my chest, not because she said weapons, but because inside that shed were my late father's hunting rifles, the only thing I had left of him. She slammed her fist on the door again and yelled, "I'm calling backup!" Her thumb jabbed her phone screen, and she shouted loud enough for the whole valley to hear, "Yes, send the HOA security team, now!" HOA security team? We didn't even have trash pickup out here. Before I could even think, Karen marched toward me and hissed, "They're coming to shut this place down. Hope you're ready." Behind her, Ranger and Smoke took slow steps forward, tails stiff, eyes locked on her like she'd just declared a personal war on them. She finally turned around and froze. "Well, why are they looking at me like that?" she whispered. "Because," I said, letting the words hang in the air, "they don't like trespassers." Her face went pale, but that was nothing, because the real twist was coming down the dirt road, sirens flashing, and Karen, with all her fake power, had no idea she'd just called the actual sheriff's department, not HOA officers, using a fake report under her own name. She tried to shut down my shed, but she only unlocked her own disaster.
The sheriff's Jeep rolled in fast, dust lifting behind it, and Karen straightened like she'd summoned the president himself. She walked toward the Jeep waving her arms, yelling, "Officer, arrest him! He has an illegal weapons bunker and violent animals!" The deputy stepped out, hand resting on his belt, eyes scanning the scene. Ranger and Smoke stood frozen behind me like furry soldiers waiting for orders. The sheriff himself climbed out next, giving Karen a slow, confused stare. "Ma'am, you the one who called?" "Yes," she barked. "This man is storing dangerous firearms in that shed. He threatened me, and those beasts almost attacked me." The sheriff looked at the llamas, then at me, then back at Karen. His expression didn't change, but I saw it, that tiny twitch in his jaw, the same twitch he had the last time he had to deal with her. "Ma'am, what exactly made you come onto his property?" "He doesn't own it," Karen snapped. "The HOA does." "The HOA? There is no HOA within 7 miles of here." Her smile collapsed instantly, but she recovered fast. Well, we started one, a new community protection board. I'm the chairwoman." The sheriff tilted his head. "A committee that has no legal authority and no members?" Karen swallowed hard. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then she pointed at my shed again. "Check it. He has guns, probably illegal, probably planning something." The sheriff didn't move toward the shed. Instead, he turned toward me and said quietly, "You want to show her?" I nodded, because this was the part she never expected. I walked to the shed, unlocked the door, and flipped the lights on. Karen leaned forward to see what shocking, evil stash she was about to expose. Then she froze. Inside were my father's antique hunting rifles, each tagged, preserved, and legally registered under my military veteran exemption. numbered, certified, logged, protected. The sheriff stepped beside her. Every single item in here is legal and under federal veteran protection, which means your report, he paused, letting her feel the drop, could count as filing a false emergency claim. Her face twisted. No, I thought. But Ranger suddenly snorted loud behind her, one sharp warning blast. She jumped so hard she stumbled backward into the sheriff. He caught her by the arm, steadied her, then said, "Ma'am, why are your shoes covered in fresh mud?" Karen blinked in panic, because that mud didn't come from my yard. It came from the locked nature reserve behind my property, the one only county staff were allowed to enter. And suddenly the sheriff wasn't looking at her like a loud neighbor anymore. He was looking at her like a suspect. She came to expose me, but the mud on her shoes exposed something bigger.
Karen froze like her feet had turned to concrete. The sheriff bent down, scraped some of the dried mud from her heel and rubbed it between his fingers. His eyes narrowed. "This isn't common dirt. This is marsh soil. From the reserve." Her throat clicked. I was just walking my dog." "You don't have a dog," I said softly. Karen snapped toward me, eyes shaking. "Stay out of this!" But the sheriff wasn't listening to her anymore. He looked past us, toward the tall fence that separated my land from the protected marsh. It was still locked, the padlock still sealed, no signs of damage. But Karen's shoes didn't lie. She'd been somewhere she absolutely shouldn't have been. He took a slow step closer to her. "Ma'am, did you enter the reserve?" Karen wiped her palms down her shirt. "It was just a shortcut." "The reserve is monitored by motion triggers," the sheriff said. "Anyone who passes the line gets logged." Her eyes went wide. They don't really check those, right?" He just stared at her. And that silence, that heavy, slow silence, told me everything. The deputy leaned into his radio, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Karen tried to change the subject fast. Look, forget the reserve! His animals attacked me! They're dangerous!" Ranger and Smoke stood perfectly still, like statues carved out of long, annoyed patience. The sheriff sighed. "Ma'am, llamas don't attack people unless they're provoked." "That's what I'm saying," she screamed. "They hate me." Smoke suddenly took one calm step forward, then two, and Karen shrieked, hiding behind the sheriff. He held up a hand. "Easy, Smoke. Back up." Smoke obeyed instantly. The sheriff glanced at me. "They're trained, aren't they?" I nodded once. "Search and rescue certified." Karen blinked, confused. "Wait, llamas can be trained?" I didn't answer. She didn't deserve the explanation. Then the deputy's radio crackled. "Loud! Sheriff, the reserve camera shows movement at 4:13 p.m. One adult female. Matches subject's clothing." Karen's knees wobbled. I'm not a criminal. I was just checking something." "Checking what?" the sheriff asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "A cave." The sheriff and I traded a look. "A cave? There's no cave in that reserve. It's all marshland." Karen shook her head hard. "No, you don't get it. I heard noises, people talking. I swear someone was down there. Something is happening underground." The sheriff let out a breath like he didn't believe a single word, but the tremor in Karen's voice wasn't fake. She was scared. Terrified, actually. And then she whispered something that made even my stomach drop. They weren't people. She didn't break into the reserve to cause trouble. She was running from something she couldn't explain.
The sheriff stiffened. Even Ranger and Smoke lifted their heads at the change in her voice. Karen wasn't yelling anymore. She was shaking, eyes fixed on the ground like she was remembering something she wished she hadn't seen. "What do you mean, not people?" the sheriff asked. Karen wrapped her arms around herself. "I heard voices, deep ones, echoing through the marsh, like they were coming from under the ground. And then She raised her trembling hand and pointed toward the trees. Something moved down there. It was tall, too tall. The sheriff let out a slow breath. "Ma'am, no one lives in the reserve. There are no caves, no tunnels, nothing underground." "I know what I saw," she snapped, then instantly flinched like her own voice scared her. "I went there because I thought maybe it was him," she pointed at me, "doing something illegal." I frowned. Why would I be in the marsh? She didn't answer. Her eyes darted between the trees like she expected something to step out any second. The sheriff rubbed his temples. "Karen, trespassing is one thing, but filing a false report and dragging law enforcement out here? I didn't lie," she cried. "You think I want to come here? You think I want to fight with him? Something is out there." The deputy, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke. "Sheriff, we did have that missing hiker's call 2 nights ago." The sheriff shot him a sharp look, like he wished he hadn't said that in front of her. Karen's breathing quickened. See, I told you something isn't right." I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady. "Karen, what exactly did you see?" Her lips trembled. "A shadow, walking, and when I got closer, it turned its head toward me, but its eyes—" She swallowed hard. "Its eyes weren't human." The sheriff immediately went back into lawman mode. "Okay, that's enough. We're ending this right now. You," he pointed at Karen, "are coming with us for questioning about the reserve incident." "No, I'm not going back toward those trees. I'm not—" Before she could finish, rangers suddenly made a low, grumbling warning sound. Smoke stepped in front of me, stiff as a board. Karen screamed, "It followed me! I told you it followed me!" The sheriff spun around, hand on his holster. "What's behind us?" I felt the hair on my arms stand straight up, because from the tree line, something crackled. Not a footstep, not an animal. Something electrical. A faint, pulsing hum drifted across the air like a broken radio signal. Karen backed into the sheriff. "It's here! I told you it's here!" The sheriff lifted his flashlight, shining it toward the trees. And that's when we saw it. Not a creature, not a person. A metal pole sticking out of the dirt, glowing faint blue, like it was sending a signal underground. Karen sobbed. That wasn't there yesterday."
The sheriff walked toward the glowing pole slowly, every step careful, Ranger and Smoke following behind him like silent guards. The closer we got, the more that strange humming grew, like a heartbeat trapped in metal. The air around it felt warm, almost vibrating. Karen clung to the side of the Jeep. "Don't touch it! Please don't touch it!" she whispered. The sheriff crouched, shining his flashlight on the pole. "This isn't county equipment," he muttered. "And it's not electrical. No wiring, no base, nothing leading into the ground. What the hell is this?" The deputy swallowed. "Should I call it in?" "Not yet," the sheriff said. "I don't want panic spreading over something we can't identify." Karen shook her head hard. "You don't get it. If this is showing, then the others are waking up too." A chill crawled up my spine. "Others?" Karen wiped her face with her trembling hands. "There were 3. I saw 3 poles when I was running. Only this one was glowing. The other 2 were dead, but they were there. I swear they were there." The sheriff turned toward her, voice stern. "If you know where the other poles are, you're going to show us." "No," Karen backed away. "I'm not going back into that reserve." "You trespassed before. You can walk us to the entrance. After that, we'll handle it." Karen shook so violently she could barely speak. "I wasn't trespassing to start trouble. I heard a scream, a human scream, and when I stepped inside the reserve, something answered it." The sheriff's jaw tightened. He didn't believe her completely, But he didn't ignore it either. Missing hikers, strange noises, a glowing pole that shouldn't exist. Something was wrong, and we all knew it. Then my llamas reacted again, but differently this time. Ranger stepped between me and the trees, lowering his head defensively, like he was protecting me from something he sensed before any human could. Smoke's ears twitched, turning toward the deeper marsh. Karen's voice cracked. "It's moving! I told you it wasn't human! It doesn't walk like us! It slides!" The deputy grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the tree line. The beam shook in his hand. Nothing moved. The sheriff whispered, "Everyone, stay still." We held our breath. Then, crack. A branch snapped deep in the marsh. Smoke hissed. Ranger stomped the ground. The sheriff raised his weapon. "Show yourself!" But no one stepped out. Instead, a second pole, farther in, flickered to life for just 1 second. One blue flash, like a camera shutter in the dark. Karen screamed, "It's signaling! They're waking each other up!" The sheriff spun toward me. "Do you have cameras facing the reserve?" My heart thudded. "Yes, motion activated, high resolution." He pointed toward my house. "We need to see that footage now." Karen grabbed my arm suddenly, grip ice cold. "If that thing shows up on your cameras, you'll believe me, because it already knows your land is the closest to the exit." Karen wasn't warning us about danger. She was warning us that we were standing on its only way out.
We hurried back toward my house, the sheriff pushing everyone to move but stay quiet. Every step felt heavier than the last. Even the air seemed thicker, like the marsh was breathing behind us. Ranger and Smoke stayed glued to my sides, their bodies tense, eyes locked on the tree line. Karen kept whispering, "It's coming, it's coming." But the sheriff shut her down. "Save it, not another word until we see the footage." Inside my living room, I pulled up the security panel. The screen flickered on, showing 4 angles pointed toward the reserve fence. The sheriff leaned over my shoulder, arms crossed tight, his face unreadable. The first camera showed nothing, just fog drifting across the grass. The second camera showed the glowing pole, still humming faintly. The third camera... Karen gasped, "Wait, rewind, rewind." The sheriff snapped, "Let him work." I scrubbed back 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then I stopped breathing. On the edge of the frame, right behind the fence, a shadow stood completely still. Not human, not animal. Long, thin, and slightly bent forward like it didn't know how to hold itself upright. The sheriff stiffened. Pause there. The shadow didn't move, but something about it felt wrong, like every bone in its body was the wrong shape. Karen covered her mouth. "That's it! That's the thing that looked at me!" The deputy whispered, "What is that?" Before anyone could answer, the silhouette in the footage jerked its head toward the camera, fast, too fast, like it heard us watching it. Karen screamed. The sheriff slammed his hand on the desk. "Mute that damn footage before we wake half the county!" But my eyes stayed locked on the screen. Because whatever that thing was, it didn't just look at the camera. It looked past it, like it saw me. The sheriff leaned closer. "Zoom in." I zoomed, slowly, pixel by pixel. The shape didn't have a face. Just 2 faint glowing dots where eyes should have been. And then the shadow lifted an arm and pointed directly at my house. Karen stumbled back. "It knows where we are!" But then something even stranger happened.
Smoke, my normally calm llama, walked right up to the monitor and hissed, a deep, guttural warning sound I'd never heard from him before. Ranger pressed beside him, stamping hard, staring at the screen like he recognized the shape. The sheriff grabbed his radio. "This is Sheriff Mallory. We need backup to the rural perimeter now. Unknown entity confirmed on private surveillance." But before he could finish, the live feed cut out. All 4 cameras flashed bright white, then black. Karen sobbed. "That's how it started in the marsh. The lights went first." The sheriff turned to me, voice low and steady. "Something's coming out of that reserve, and we are not letting it reach your land." His deputy swallowed hard. "Sheriff, look outside." We all turned toward the window. The pole in the marsh, the glowing one, went dark. Then, 1 second later, a second pole lit up. Closer. Much closer. The cameras didn't fail. They shut themselves off, like something wanted to move in the dark.
The second pole glowed brighter than the first. Not a soft blue anymore, but a harsh, pulsing light that cut through the fog like a warning flare. Ranger backed up toward me, nudging my hip urgently, while Smoke planted his legs like he was ready to charge straight through the wall if he had to. The sheriff steadied his breathing. "Everyone away from the windows, now." Karen didn't move. She stood frozen, staring at that pulsing light like it was calling her, like it recognized her. I grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "Hey, look at me. What happens when the poles light up?" Her voice cracked. "It means it's closer than before." The sheriff locked the door and turned off every lamp in the room. Darkness filled the house except for the faint glow leaking through the curtains. The deputy whispered, "Sheriff, should we fall back? Call state authorities?" The sheriff shook his head. "Not until we know what we're dealing with." But his hand hovered over his holster anyway. Then, a low rumble vibrated under the floor. Not from the ground. Deeper than that, like something was tunneling under the earth itself. Karen grabbed my shirt. "That's the sound I heard in the marsh. It moves underground, Sheriff. It moves under us." The sheriff snapped, "Quiet!" We all held our breath. The rumble stopped. The house went silent. Then, bam! Something slammed against the fence outside. A heavy, dragging weight, metal straining. The sheriff ushered us back. "Stay behind me. Nobody goes near that door." Another slam, this time louder, closer. Smoke and Ranger pushed in front of us, their bodies shaking, not with fear, but with pure instinct. They faced the door like they were ready to protect us with everything they had. Karen whispered, "It found the exit. It's trying to break through." The sheriff raised his weapon. The deputy did too. Their flashlights trembled in their hands. Then, the glowing pole outside flickered, once, twice, and went dark. The sheriff stepped forward, gun raised, tense as steel. But the pole didn't stay dark. It lit up again, right outside my gate. Not in the marsh, not 50 yards away, not 10, 5 feet from my front steps. Karen screamed and stumbled backward. "No, no, that's impossible. It can't move that fast. It can't." But before she finished, Smoke let out a deep roar, a sound I'd never heard from an animal before, like he was calling for a fight. The sheriff's radio crackled violently, static, hissing. Then a voice, garbled, distorted, came through. "To back up, inbound, stay inside, entity is..." The message cut off entirely. Then the deputy whispered, voice shaking, "Sheriff, look." Outside the window, just beyond the glowing pole, a tall silhouette stood perfectly still. Longer, clearer, closer. And then, slowly, deliberately, it lifted its hand and placed it on my gate. Metal began to bend. It didn't break into the reserve. It broke out. The metal groaned under its grip, bending like soft wire instead of solid steel. The sheriff aimed straight at the gate. "Step back," he whispered. "All of you, behind me." But Ranger and Smoke didn't move. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking the creature's path to us, heads down, ears pinned, breath sharp and ready. The silhouette pulled the gate wider, wider, until it had space to squeeze through. Karen sobbed behind me. "It's coming! It's coming! I told you!" And then the creature stepped forward. Slow. Dragging. Its limbs wrong. Too long. Bending in places they shouldn't. Those faint glowing eyes locked straight onto our doorway. The sheriff steadied his aim. "One more step and I fire!" But I noticed something everyone else missed. The creature wasn't looking at us. It was looking past us, right at Karen. She froze. "No, no, please!" The creature tilted its head. A mechanical crack ran through its body. And then, Ranger charged. He bolted through the door gap before I could stop him, letting out a fierce, wild roar. Smoke followed right behind, hooves pounding the dirt like thunder. The creature jerked back, stumbling as both llamas rammed it with brutal force. It hit the ground hard, the pole behind it flickering wildly, like its signal was glitching. The sheriff yelled, "Move in!" He and the deputy rushed forward, weapons drawn, surrounding the fallen creature. But when the sheriff led his flashlight, everything changed. The creature wasn't flesh, wasn't bone. It was metal, rusty, old, half buried in marsh mud, like it had been underground for years. A mechanical frame with long limbs and panels peeling off. And where eyes should have been, 2 cracked lenses flickered blue. Karen dropped to her knees. That's what chased me." The sheriff kicked one of its limbs. It clanged. "This thing isn't alive, it's a machine, some kind of field survey robot." The deputy knelt, brushing mud off a plate on its back. There was a faded government seal. And a date. 1984. I stared. "This thing is 40 years old." The sheriff grunted. "Looks like it malfunctioned in the marsh. Probably dug itself into a tunnel. Woke up again during the storm. Those poles?" He pointed toward the glowing rods. "Signal beacons. Old tech. Remote guidance. When one lit up, it was just trying to find the next one." Karen's face twisted. "So it wasn't hunting me?" The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "It thinks in straight lines. You were just unfortunately standing where it needed to go. Doesn't care who you are." Karen let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half humiliation. "So I started a war with a llama farm over a broken robot?" The sheriff crossed his arms. "And filed a fake HOA report, trespassed in a protected reserve, and tampered with private property." Karen's relief vanished. "Wait, hold on." He turned to the deputy. "Cuff her." "No, Sheriff, please." Ranger snorted like he had re-agreed the decision. Smoke stomped proudly beside him. The sheriff looked at me. "As for you, you saved the county a huge mess. You want to press charges?" I glanced at Karen, angry, trembling, and finally exposed. Then at my llama guards standing like heroes. I gave a small nod. "Yeah, I do." Karen cried out as the deputy led her to the jeep. "This is not fair! He's dangerous! He keeps weapons! Llamas attacked me!" The sheriff smirked. "Ma'am, those dangerous llamas just saved you from walking into a malfunctioning government robot. You should be thanking them." Ranger lifted his head proudly. Smoke puffed his chest. As the jeep drove off, lights flashing, I finally exhaled. The marsh was quiet again. The poles went dark, and the old robot lay silent in the dirt. The sheriff clapped my shoulder.
You and your animals did good tonight. Real good. I looked at my llamas, still guarding me like a unit. My dad always said, you protect your land or you don't deserve it. Karen tried to report my shed as a threat, but the only real danger was her own lies.